Hello everyone and welcome back to another Rise of Myth Cthulhu video. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into the Possessed class to give you all the tips and tricks on how to manage your sanity and this ultimate weapon of destruction. The Possessed class is quite an interesting one. You generally get the most value out of this class by spending sanity to increase the amount of damage you're outputting. However, the drawback of that is the more sanity you spend, the more likely you are to go insane or potentially lose the game from draining this too much. The idea is this is a class where you've got to really balance about how much you're spending in order to get the maximum output through all of your different battles throughout the game. Before we get started, we're going to take a look at the class Relic. The class Relic means we start with the game with 11 HP and 11 sanity. This is very healthy pools on both stats. 11 sanity is great. It means that we're only realistically going to be going insane when we want to. I'll come to that in a minute because there is a debuff that actually helps this class when you're insane, so it's a little bit more interesting. And 11 is a healthy health pool to start off with as well, especially if you've got some progression points and you take the upgrades to give yourself some more on each stat. The key ability for this relic is if you have not lost either health or sanity during your turn, you regain 1 sanity. This is really interesting. It's sustain that you don't have to pay energy for, which makes it a very powerful class relic. The challenge being that most of the really good cards on Possessed will cost you health or sanity when you want to play them, so you've kind of got to plan for a few turns where perhaps you are not going to play either in order to regain that sanity. We need to take a look at what our debuff is if we're insane, so that's when we're at 5 or less sanity. And basically, whenever you play an attack that would cause you to lose sanity, you get +1 attack on it, which is great, but the drawback is then you lose a health. So you end up in this situation once you've drained your sanity down to being insane, that your attacks get more powerful, but then you are still spending sanity and you are still losing health. The skill for this character is going to be straddling that line to getting yourself down to about 5 when you need to be in the insane, and then spending and increasing your sanity just to go over that line. So ideally sitting on 6 when you're done with your turn and 5 when you want to actually start using abilities. However, if you do go for that kind of build, do make sure that you build out a little bit of sustain. Otherwise you might find that you end up driving yourself insane and bleeding yourself to death. Next, we're going to take a look at the basic deck. So this is the deck that you're going to begin every single run with, and the cards that we're eventually going to be looking to try and take out of the deck when we start making improvements as the fights get harder and harder. And the first couple of cards we're going to take a look at, I will pull out. I believe it is 7 because the rest are duplicates. Let's just flip them up. Here we go. So we're going to do this in terms of attacks, then defense, and then our skill at the end. So for our attacks, we have Whiplash. This is 2 energy, 2 attack, and you get +1 attack if the enemy is defending. So if the enemy has any defense, you just get +1. Not particularly great. Most enemies do actually defend if they're not planning to inflict a debuff, so this can just help you get through the guard on the earlier stages of the game when you want to sneak some damage through. Attack 2 for 2 energy is it's not where you want to be. So once you start progressing through the game, the ideal stat conversion that you're looking for is 1 energy for 2 points of stats. So that would be 2 attack or 2 defense for 1 energy is a good rate, and especially what you want to be looking at once you start getting the common cards when you want to start evaluating. Overall, this is a card that I don't mind having in my deck a little bit later in the game because it does still discard for 2 energy and it doesn't cost sanity to use this. So it can also play a little bit into our bracelet as well if we want to take a turn to try and regain back some of our sanity. So Whiplash, it will do. It's in terms of a basic attack for our deck, this is actually pretty good. Next up we have Subjugate. This is a melee attack that has attack 1, and then you add 1 attack for each weakness the enemy has. Now this is a really interesting card, and I like it for multiplayer when you've got other classes such as the Sorcerer or the Detective who can put down the weaknesses. Please don't mind the Spanish that we left on for the attack there. That does in fact say attack 1 for any of our English watchers, which I assume is probably most of you. This card is pretty weak in the deck on its own, because you have to sort of build around it to start getting those weaknesses down. Enemies can have a maximum of 5 conditions, so if you, for example, put 5 weaknesses onto the enemy, you would be attacking for 5 of this, but it's very unlikely you're going to be getting to that point. This is a great multiplayer card, and it's one in solo I probably wouldn't be focusing on too much. It's one of the cards I'll be looking to remove. It can, in a pinch though, if you've played another card that's given you the weakness, give you that golden ratio of 1 energy for 2 damage, which is pretty acceptable. It's also 1 energy on the discard, 1 energy to play, so in your earlier stages of the game, you might be, for example, playing your Liberation, your Subjugate, and maybe an attack in a turn, and that'd be considered a pretty good turn. Our next card is Hold. It's a 2 energy melee attack and defense card. So the key with melee attack and defenses is that it counts for both. There are certain cards that will say if you play an attack or play a defense card, this would count in this situation. So this is the first example of a card that costs us sanity to play. So this would be increased by our insanity debuff. It would also prevent our bracelet from triggering. We get attack 2 and defense 2, so we're getting 4 for 2 energy. That's a really good ratio. We are losing a sanity, but we're actually okay in this class doing so. So we have some built-in sustain on our bracelet, and we've got other options to help us get sanity back. So this is very, very good early. The challenge with this card is that when you start looking at some of the rewards, that the other cards will give you a lot more in terms of stats for that point of sanity. But early on, this is going to be likely that you prevent yourself from taking any damage, and you'll be able to keep progressing fights and closing them out in the first 3 rounds, which is very important. You'll see when you get a proper chance to look at combat that after round 4, bad things start happening to you and your team, so you want to close fights out quickly, and this protects your life whilst advancing the fight. So overall, it's a pretty solid card to begin in your deck, and one you're going to be looking for upgrades for a little bit later on. Sudden Transformation is a 2 energy melee attack for 4. This is very strong. This gives us our golden ratio. It does come with a drawback. We receive a bleed and we lose a sanity. So the bleed means at the end of our turn we lose that life. However, we will not lose that life if the fight is over. So if we time this to be the killing blow, we effectively don't have to receive that first drawback. We will always pay 1 sanity, and this card will get increased by our insane debuff. I keep calling it a debuff, but it's actually kind of weird. In this class, it's kind of the point is you want to be straddling that line between sane and insane, because it's a buff when used correctly. Very, very strong card, and will let you kill lots of things very early, and the damage spike on that is pretty good. And then later on, it can just be discarded for 2 energy. It also plays into your when you lose sanity effects, and you've got quite a few of them in the overall strategy. So this is a great card, especially to begin with, and just try to play around when you want to use this. Ideally to end a fight. Sometimes you have to open with it, and that's fair. There is a card in our deck that we'll be talking about in just a second that can also play very well with this. We have Ushanka's Peace. I do apologize if I pronounced that incorrectly, but this is a 2 energy defense card. It gives you defense 2, so we're not great on the stats in terms of what we're looking for, but the really cool thing with this is you may discard 1 condition to draw a card. If you remember when we had our Sudden Transformation, we can give ourselves the bleed. If our follow-up is the Ushakia's Peace, there you go, I'm getting it right now, we can remove that bleed and we get to draw a card, which then means we're gaining a lot more value because we're saving a health point, which is quite valuable, and we're drawing an additional card, which can be more energy. It could be something else that we could actually play. Overall, this is a good card, and one I'm quite happy to keep in a little bit later, because you'll come into some enemies that will just stick you with debuffs at the start of their turn, and then you can use this to remove those debuffs and get free cards out of it whilst also getting defense. This is a really good card, and also in team play you can just take the conditions off of your allies. Next up, we're going to take a look at Scare Away. This is a 2 energy defense card, defense 2, and then we get to choose to regain 1 sanity or add defense 1. So again, not really what we're looking for on stats to energy ratio, but being able to regain a sanity, we can combo this as part of our turn with the Ushakia's Bracelet. Could effectively gain 2 sanity back in a turn and get defense 2, or we can get defense 3. This is really, really good for this character, because there are going to be times when you just want to gain a sanity and you'd be willing to pay 2 energy for it in the right circumstances. So I really like Scare Away. This is a good card. Lastly, we have the skill Liberation. This is a 1 energy skill that inflicts 2 weakness on up to 2 enemies, and you get to draw a card. The fact that it replaces itself is actually insane. And then characters lose 1 sanity. So this has a drawback for team play. If you're playing in cooperatively, that you're going to be costing your team sanity, and not everybody wants to be insane like you. However, in solo, this is really, really good. Effectively, you're getting 2 stat points. You're reducing the damage coming in by 2 for 1 energy. And you're also drawing a card to replace it, which means you're getting through your deck quicker, which means you're going to be shuffling your discard back into your deck, allowing you to play your better cards more frequently, and also more consistently as you're getting through the deck. You have a really good starting kit for this class to power through the first couple of fights. It's just a case of getting used to how much sanity to spend, and then how to balance that between regaining with these 2 effects. Next up, we're going to take a look at the class items. So if we're playing solo, the reason we're talking about class items is normally you wouldn't get them until you have some progress points, and then you would choose which upgrades you want at the start of the game. And you can see right there at the top, for 2 progress points you can get a random class item. For 4 progress points you can choose your class item. However, if we are playing solo, we get this awesome double-sided card. So on one side we have the starting boost. So this basically means that we get a random class item, we increase our initial health by +2, bringing us up to 13, and then we get to replace 2 starter cards with 2 random common cards. The common cards are going to be better than the cards in your core deck, and you can choose, depending on whether you're playing for the weakness build or the sanity build, which cards that you want to remove from your deck to begin the game with. If you combo that with some of the other progress points, you can actually get your deck down quite significantly for not that many progress points, and that's one of the more powerful effects that you can grab from the upgrades. On the other side of starting boost is the long path. So for this one you get a class item, and then servant level enemies reward an uncommon card instead of a common card. So you start fighting from fight 5 that the servant enemies will appear. You get no additional benefits in the beginning. You basically take this once you know the game a little bit better, as it was going to result in your deck getting a lot more powerful a lot quicker. And once you're more familiar, you're probably less likely to take the starting boost and go more along the lines of the long path, especially if you're playing into 2 acts. If you're just playing the first act, starting boost is very, very strong. You start off with a much better deck, which means you're going to conserve more resources. But if you're playing for the 2 acts, I strongly recommend the long path, or if you're feeling very, very confident, because the uncommon cards are really, really good. With that said, we need to talk about what these class items are. We have 4, and we would be dealing ourselves 1 randomly. I'll just go through and quickly describe what they do, and then we'll do a bit of a dive into them. So the Ruby setting is, after each combat we regain a health if we are insane, and we regain an extra health if we're wounded. So if we pay all of our health down, or we take a couple of hits, we can potentially be gaining 2 health back, and that's going to help us sort of straddle that line of staying at about 6 and 6, which is kind of where we want to be when playing this class. We want to be 6/6 at the end of the turn, and then we want to be 5 or when we're doing our turn, because then we'll heal up, and then we'll probably have other effects to increase our sanity, so we stay out of being insane. So this is a really good class item. It's also very, very good if you're new and you take a little bit too much damage because you're not used to when you should be guarding and when you should be more aggressive. It's a pretty solid item, and you can definitely build around it in the sanity draining build with your super attacks. The Citrine setting, at the start of your turn, you inflict a stun on enemies with more health than you. This one is a little bit more tricky to use. So stun does 2 things, depending on if you're playing solo or if you're playing in multiplayer. If you're playing in solo, stun is treated as a vulnerability, so that's one of these green icons. Vulnerability means the next time you deal damage to that source, you deal that much damage +1, and then you remove the vulnerability. So that's pretty strong. The challenge you're going to find is that if you are not taking a lot of damage early, that you probably won't be getting too many triggers of this until you've gotten a little bit further into the run. So it's a little bit of a slow starter, but then when enemies start coming down that have much bigger health pools, so you're looking like 8 or 9 and you're trying to straddle this line, you'll be able to get the vulnerabilities, well, the stuns, which count as vulnerabilities. In team play, the stun means that you get to choose who that creature is going to attack. This is very strong for redirecting towards the player who has better defensive cards, or just getting the attention away from you, which allows you to spend more of your time focusing on your offensive options rather than worrying about guarding. Citrine is a harder one to play with, but it's pretty good once you get it going. Emerald Settings is a class item where if you're wounded or insane at the start of your turn, you deal 1 damage to 1 enemy. This is great. Again, we want to be straddling that line. We can effectively stay wounded on 5 and then start getting those little extra points of damage through. If we have this, we don't have the ruby setting, so we're not healing, but we can only have 1 class item at a time. This is very good for when we're straddling correctly, and we just get free damage off of this, which is basically worth half an energy every turn. As long as you're on one of these status effects, you just get half an energy's worth of value every single turn, which I really like. This is pretty good, but again, you're not going to be doing a lot with this in the early couple of fights unless you're playing really loose, which I don't recommend doing, especially if you're new. So these two probably, once you get a little bit more experience with the class, are a little bit stronger, but because initially you're effectively playing without a class item unless you get really, really aggressive. Lastly, we're going to take a look at the Obsidian Settings, which is if you're insane, you're immune to conditions. Once per round, with the first one that the enemies were going to inflict on you, you regain 1 sanity. This is really, really, really strong. So we want to be insane on this character for when we are ending our turn. Well, during our turn, we don't want to be insane during the enemy's turn. However, this flips that dynamic a little bit. So what you're looking for is to be insane, and then when an enemy tries to put a status effect on you, that gets ignored, and then you regain 1 sanity, and you'll go up to 6. So this gives you that straddling strategy very, very well. Being immune to conditions means that you can't catch bleeds, you don't get vulnerabilities, you don't get stuns, you don't get weakened. You can avoid a lot of random bad stuff happening to you with this card. This is extraordinarily powerful, and it really does test your ability to manage your resources to stay in the perfect zone, which is 5-6 on the sanity. This is a really, really good class item, one I'm always excited to have, especially on 2 acts when the enemies start getting really, really tough and doing really horrible things to you. This will allow you to ignore a bunch of that and then just focus on smashing things, which is always fun. Next, we're going to start taking a look at some of the rewards. I'm not going to go through all of the rewards because I don't want to spoil the entire game, but hopefully this gives you a little bit of an insight on my thought process and kind of things to look out for whilst you are playing through your games. So the first 3 we're going to take a look at will be these. Beginning of the End. I absolutely love this card. It's probably first pick anytime I see it as a reward. One of the mechanics in Rise of Myth is that once you see your rewards after a fight, so you draw 3, we get to either spend the sanity or one of our gold coins to add a 4th card to our reward lineup. I will aggressively do that to try and find one of these 3 cards, especially Beginning of the End. This card is absolutely insane. It deals attack equal to the sanity points you are missing, up to 6, and you lose a sanity. So at most, you can be getting 7 damage off of this with the insane debuff. And that, for 2 energy on a bronze reward, is actually insane. That will straight up one-shot a lot of the smaller enemies, including many minions will get obliterated by this. So that works. This works also very well with the fact that you're going to be draining your sanity trying to straddle that line. If you remember, we begin at 11, and if we get ourselves down to 5 so we can use that, it's like, oh cool, we've got 6 right there. And then we're paying a health, and then we're getting 7 damage, which is just really, really strong. I'm a huge fan of this card, and I would strongly recommend you try and grab it any chance you get, especially if you are focusing on the sanity build. Next up, we have Combo. Combo is a permanent skill. So basically, this sits in front of you for once you've played it, and then at the end of the fight, it will go back to your deck. And this one has the skill, once per round, you play 2 different attack cards, deal 2 damage to 1 enemy. This is really cool if you're going to be spending a lot of your turns playing attacks, and then you're effectively getting 3 damage onto the enemy. I play an attack, and then I deal 2 damage. This is really, really cool, and once you've got it down, it effectively takes 2 turns before it pays itself off in terms of its energy cost, as you could have just been spending that 4 energy to get yourselves 4 points of damage. But after this has paid for itself, it's very strong, especially in the Great Old One fights, which go on a bit longer. The value you get out of an early combo is pretty strong. You do have to build your deck more around the offensive options rather than the defensive options, or look for the cards that are attack. Then you can use that with combo. Lastly, we're going to take a look at a defensive card, which is Ushakiya's Control. This is defense 3 for 2 energy. Not entirely where we want to be on stats. We also have the -1 blue flame. This means that when we discard it, it discards for 1 less energy, so we only get 1 energy when we decide to discard it. But the thing that makes this card really, really good is that we get to choose 1, regain 1 health, or regain 1 sanity when we play this. So not only are we protecting ourselves, we're also getting back one of our resources, and also that can contribute towards our Ushakiya's Bracelet, which will let us get sanity back if we take a turn off from spending it. So we can start to replenish quite well on our primary resource. This is a good card. It's one I'm not highly prioritizing, but I am very, very aware of whenever this comes up, and I'm considering how much sustain do I have in my deck and how much am I spending my resources. And then if the answer is moderate, then this is a card that I want to grab. And this will serve you very, very well throughout all stages of the game. Next, we're going to look at the uncommon cards. So we'll start getting these from Encounter 7 when we're playing through. However, if we are playing the long path in solo, we'll start getting these from Encounter 5. These cards are very, very powerful. And you'll see why, because the energy to stat conversion on these cards, you're generally looking at about 3 points of stats per energy, which is a lot higher than the golden ratio that we're looking at in order to have good cards. First, we're going to take a look at 1 less. This is a 2 energy melee attack that attacks for 6, and then coup de grace, which means if this deals the killing blow, you regain 1 health or 1 sanity. What's not to love? It is well beyond the acceptable ratio, and we get passive sustain that we don't really spend energy on. We just effectively get to regain these things. This also works with the Ushakiya's Bracelet, where if we're not spending health or sanity, we can regain a sanity. So this helps contribute to one of our turns where we can start quickly regenerating effectively. But this is really, really good, and I'm always looking for this whenever I get my rewards. This is one of my top picks for the uncommons. Next up, we have Supernatural Fury. Supernatural Fury is an insanely good card, but I will point out that there is a pretty big drawback that if you just try to discard it for energy, it's worth 0 energy. That's what that -2 blue flames mean. So you're only ever playing this every time you draw it. But it's good enough that you will probably always want to play this. So you get attack 3 and defense 3, so we're getting 6 points of stats for 2 energy, which is golden. This is, wow, this is above golden. This is platinum. This is proper stuff, this is. And we get the extra benefits of if we're wounded, or if we're insane, or if we're both, we get to regain a health, we get to regain a sanity. So again, if we're straddling that line of being on 5, so we're wounded and insane, we can effectively go 6/6, which is where we want to be. This is just a really, really great card all around, and you're progressing the fight by dealing damage. You're also protecting yourself, which is very, very good against many of the Great Old One fights where you need to focus on both aspects. And we're also getting sustain out of this on both of our resources. I absolutely love this card and will happily have multiples of this in my deck when playing through, depending on how the rewards fall. Lastly, I wanted to show you a card that will cost you sanity to play that sort of shows how ridiculous some of these can get. This is Permission to Destroy. It's a 0 energy card that discards for positive 2 energy, so we can basically use this to pay for cost for other cards, which is incredible. And then we basically get choose 1, attack 3 and lose 1 sanity, which is incredible value. That is attack 4 if we are insane because of our debuff. And we also have attack 5 at the cost of 2 sanity. Attack 5, very, very strong. It costs 0 energy to just smite something effectively. I love this card. This card is so good, and it plays into so many of the other synergies that we have going on with our class. This is an example of a really, really good offensive option and allows you to be the primary damage dealer in a team game. This is a great card and one to definitely look out for. Next, we're going to take a look at the rare cards. So you'll get your first rare card when you defeat the Great Old One before you go into Act 2, and then there's a fight or 2 in the Act 2, depending on how risky you want to be, where you can then pick up another rare card. So we're going to take a look at 3. This is not going to reveal the entire pool, because I want you to discover some of them, but this will give you a little taste of which ones I like. Last Will is a 1 energy attack 4, and then you get to decide how much sanity you lose, and you add that much attack equal to that amount. pretty strong. Also plays into our debuff. We could just effectively pay 5 sanity and then deal 9 damage for 1 energy, which is an absolute insane ratio. This is a very strong card, especially if you are able to straddle that line and just add a little bit of attack. I would play this as 1 energy for 4 attack on its own, even without spending sanity. This is good enough, but the fact that we can do that, this can give us really, really big damage to punch through and deal with some of those tougher enemies. An absolute insane card. I really like Last Will. It's a great one to pick up when you're going into Act 2. Rampant Corruption. This is a 1 energy permanent skill. So as we said before, this just sits in front of us for the rest of the fight. It's worth -1 energy when you discard it, so you have to play this if you draw it. Well, you don't have to play it, but you'd be pretty insane not to. If you're drawing a rare card and you're not playing it, there is something very interesting happening in fight. So this card, at the start of your turn, you gain 2 energy and you lose a sanity. So this is going to consistently drain our sanity out. However, for that we are getting 2 energy. That's the equivalent of discarding a card, one of our starter cards. But we also add attack 2 and defense 2 to your cards that reduce your sanity. So all of a sudden, your cards that are attacks will also give us defense, and we're also adding a ton of damage. So we're getting free energy, we're getting free stats to all of our cards, making our ratios so much better. If we've built a few Ushakiya's bracelets or other options to make sure that we can keep getting our sanity back, this is great. It's worth noting that once you have this, you effectively switch off your bracelet because you're going to be losing sanity every turn. But the 2 energy attack 2 defense 2 is generally really, really worth it. I would happily not get the benefits of the bracelet in favor of Rampant Corruption, but do keep in mind that this does actually go against what you... If you need to sustain, you can actually start draining yourself pretty fast with this. Lastly, I want to take a look at Gates of Misfortune. So this is a 2 energy skill card that inflicts 2 conditions on enemies that have weakness, and then you get to draw 3 cards. This is really, really good. We're getting 2 stats effectively. I like to think of the statuses as stats effectively, because you have the ones that deal damage, you have the ones that let you deal extra damage, you have ones that reduce damage. If you are playing multiplayer, especially with a sorcerer, and they are putting lots of weaknesses down, or even the detective are putting weaknesses down, you just get to draw 3 cards and then get 2 additional status effects, which will allow you to get through your deck much faster, which means you're more likely to draw your other great uncommon cards. So this is a really good one. I prefer it in cooperative play more so than solo, unless I'm heavily leaning into a weakness build, in which case this card is premium. Once you get this into your deck, it's like you see everything start flowing together really, really well. You do, however, have to beat the Great Old One in order to pick this up, so this is definitely something to consider. If you're playing a weakness build in order to get this card and you're only playing 1 act, probably don't do that. But once you go into Act 2, if you are on weakness and you do see this come up, this is a fantastic card. Before we wrap up this video, I do want to share one extra special card that you will get. So this is a special class relic. This is a reward for once you've beat the game on Nightmare mode and you decide that you actually want to start adding difficulty to the game when you start replaying it. Basically give you a much better version of the original class relic that you have. The Tiara lets you start with additional health, additional sanity, and you can get to regain a health and a sanity if you don't spend either of those resources. This will be important if you start playing with homebrew rules. For example, instead of drawing 6 cards per turn in solo, you start drawing 5 cards, or you decide to give all of the enemies +1 attack. This is a great relic for when you want to start exploring that part of the game and how you can continue to make it more difficult as you go through and add modifiers to your run. So that's going to wrap it up here today. What do you think of the Possessed class? Do you have any other thoughts or questions? Do you want to give any support to people watching this and so that they know what they're doing when they're playing the Possessed? We'd love to hear all about it. For now, we're going to be signing off, but if you want to catch more of these videos and sort of understand more of the deeper elements of the classes of Rise of Myth Cthulhu, remember to hit that subscribe button and follow along for our future videos. For now, I'm going to say thank you, and we'll catch you next time. Cheers.